The outpost wasn't much, just a drifting slab of alloy and recycled air orbiting a dead gas giant. Its only job, act as neutral ground for 1,000 species that hated each other slightly less than they feared war. Humans had been granted a small presence on it, not because anyone trusted them, but because no one wanted to admit how badly they needed them. Enforcer Calveth of the Zarnai Dominion had seen 40 years of blood, broken laws, and the smell of cooked ozone from plasma scars. He didn't like humans, he didn't hate them either. They just unsettled him, especially his partner. Sergeant Callum Reed wasn't imposing, average height, scar across one brow, always looked like he hadn't slept. But there was something behind his eyes that Calveth couldn't translate, even with 6 lateral empathy receptors. Something buried, something dangerous. That rotation had been calm. A drug smuggler from Telkoth arrested. 3 minor disputes arbitrated. No weapons drawn, no alarms raised, so they sat in the mess hall, shared silence, ate whatever the nutrient printers gave them, and then Callum spoke. You ever hear about the girl who stopped the Cascade Uprising? Calveth paused, looked up. The what? Callum smirked, but it was a tired smirk, like the kind that knew no one ever believed him. Right, forgot. You don't study Earth history. Calveth narrowed his eyes. What uprising? Didn't last long, Callum said. 12 systems fell into revolt after the Treaty of 3 Suns collapsed. Civilian centers got hit, bad. 1 human colony refused evacuation. And, Calveth asked, how did the uprising end? Callum stared into his ration cup like it held ghosts. She walked out. 1 girl, not a weapon, not a fighter. Just a teenage girl. She walked through enemy lines, told the rebel commanders they could either surrender peacefully or live the rest of their lives hearing every scream they caused. She wasn't bluffing. Calveth clicked in disbelief. You expect me to believe a child? Not a child, Callum interrupted quietly. A human. He didn't elaborate, he didn't have to. Calveth had seen what humans did when cornered, when grieving, when protecting something small. Still, this story, it felt wrong, too specific, too quiet, too real. What was her name? Calveth asked. Callum didn't look up. Doesn't matter, name's been lost. All they called her in the old records was the girl who stood alone. Calveth froze. He'd heard that phrase before, in a Zarnai War record, from the Zerkathi archives, even whispered in broken myth fragments by Fennec dreamspeakers. But those stories weren't human. They were ancient, pre-spaceflight, scattered across species with no shared culture. Yet they all told of a girl who stood alone, always at the edge of war, always unarmed, always speaking softly before something terrible happened. And now Callum, an off-world Earthborn, had described her like she'd lived yesterday. Something snapped inside Calveth. He stood abruptly, chest tightened, breath shallow. That story, where did you hear it? Callum raised a brow. Back home. History class. One of those side legends no one verifies. No, Calveth said. That name, that phrase, it exists in our memory chant. She is not from Earth. She predates Earth's rise to galactic presence. Callum blinked. Guess your historians missed something. Calveth backed away, visor flickering. His head buzzed, because the girl's description matched his great-grandmother's night chant before death, because no human ever should have known it. He staggered out of the mess, almost tripping over his own talons. Later that night, the security AI flagged an anomaly. Calveth's quarters were locked, sealed, shielded, but he sat in the corner, not moving, not sleeping, visor off. Claudip's bloody. On the wall behind him, smeared in his own ichor, a phrase repeated again and again. She spoke to me. She spoke to me. She spoke to me. And on the floor, scratched into the metal beneath his blood. She's not just human. She's still out there. Calveth was confined to medical observation. Officially, neural destabilization. Unofficially, fear. Fear in his own people's eyes when he screamed at the medics not to speak her name. Fear when he tried to rip out his memory receptor nodes with his own claws. Fear when he looked into the mirror and whispered, "She didn't forget me." Callum was questioned, scanned, interrogated. No anomalies, no malware. No known psychic emissions. He just told a story. That was the terrifying part. 2 days later, a Vicari archivist aboard the station received a routine report about the incident. As part of her duties, she searched her own species' ancient oral histories for matches to the phrase, "The girl who stood alone." She found 37. Across a span of 11,000 years. Different planets, different timelines, different contexts, but all described the same being, a lone young female figure standing before slaughter, always alone, always unarmed, always the last warning before something irreversible. Her pulse spiked. She downloaded the Earth file for comparison. Perfect match. Every detail, even the way she stood. She collapsed 30 minutes later during a broadcast, screaming in 5 languages at once. Security logs showed her last spoken words before losing consciousness. She was there on Gormak Prime. She stood between us and the fire. I had forgotten until the human remembered. Earth's ambassador was summoned. Ambassador Juno Walker, a career diplomat with 28 years of galactic peacekeeping under her belt, arrived at the station expecting formalities. Instead, she was greeted by silence, tense stares, and a single question from the Aurelian station master. "Did your people send her again?" "Who?" Walker asked. "The girl." Juno blinked. "What girl?" Within an hour, every species on station had filed cultural record requests with Earth. No one gave a name, no one gave a description. They all just asked the same thing. Does humanity remember the one who stood alone? And the problem was Earth didn't, not officially. There were no verified Terran documents matching her description. No Earth historian had ever filed a profile. No monument, no preserved log. She existed in fragments, urban legends, bedtime stories, strange dreams shared across continents. A face with no name, a warning with no threat. When Juno asked Callum where he'd heard it, he shrugged. "My grandfather told it to me, said it came from his father. I thought it was just a story." But it wasn't, not to the galaxy. Because once the tale re-entered circulation, it spread. And every species that heard it again started remembering things they'd forgotten. Memories buried under centuries of data. Visions that couldn't be explained. Emotion where logic should be. A Karvesh elder on Moonstrike 7 took her own life after writing, "She saved me when I was a child, but I was never a child. That world never existed. So why do I remember her smile?" A Grenthal fleetmaster recalled a siege 300 years past, one he'd sworn no human ever fought in. And yet, in his recollection, he'd seen her standing atop a ridge, blood on her palms, telling him, "It's not too late to turn back." He turned. The war ended that day, but he'd forgotten her until now. And across the stars it kept happening. One by one, species began to break, not with terror, but with grief, with shame, with longing. For something or someone they couldn't logically accept, because the girl shouldn't have existed. She couldn't have. She didn't match physics or history or biology, but they all remembered her, all except humans. Juno Walker submitted a report to Earth's Deep Archive Authority. Cross-species memory anomalies tied to a human-like figure, unprecedented mass recollection, psychological destabilization in high-empathy alien species. Immediate classification recommended. She marked the file, level theta, unknown cultural entity. Unofficially she called it something else, the trigger myth. But some believed it was never a myth at all, a hidden agent, a time-locked protector, a being only humanity could create, but none of them could remember. Or worse, she remembered them all. In Calveth's final message, scratched into a cell wall before he was transferred to a void-isolated mind capsule, he left one line: "If she comes back, tell her I tried to be better." On Earth, in the deepest level of the Arctic MindNet facility, 2 scientists stared at a genome rendering. It pulsed. It twisted. It did something no map of human DNA should have done. It reacted to audio, specifically to a spoken phrase. She stood alone. Dr. Marin Casper was no mystic. She didn't believe in ghosts, myths, or cultural memetics infecting genetic strands. But now, she wasn't sure. She had isolated the reaction after analyzing 14 different humans, people who had casually retold the girl who stood alone's story. In each case, when they spoke the tale, their neural patterns subtly changed, not enough to be obvious, but enough to form a resonance, a pattern that didn't match any known evolutionary behavior. Her colleague, Dr. Yusuf Lang, called it a cultural protein. But that didn't make sense. Proteins didn't store myth. They didn't react to stories. And yet somehow when humans remembered her, something inside them lit up. It wasn't just memory, it was recognition. Like an ancient key turning in a lock no one knew was buried in their cells. Yusuf whispered, "What if she wasn't just a story? What if she was the origin?" Marin frowned. "Of what? Of us?" They didn't publish the findings, not yet, but the data leaked because of course it did. And once the galactic community saw it, everything changed. On the Zernai World Forge, an elder dreamshaper collapsed after watching a human child's retelling of the story. The last words on his lips, "She was there when our star broke. She held my mother's hand. She taught us not to fear the dark." His people had no contact with humans before the last century, yet he'd remembered her, before Earth had even left its atmosphere. It got worse. More accounts, more memories. The girl wasn't just remembered across space, but across time. A captain of the Crown Dominion found an ancient painting buried inside a fortress wall, dated 10,000 years before Earth's radio signals were detectable. It showed her face, not stylized, not symbolic, her same stance, same clothes, same eyes. The painting had a phrase underneath translated from dead Crown script, the one who gave us the choice. Earth tried to distance itself, politely. Official messages went out. This is a cultural myth, nothing more. Humans do not claim responsibility for what is remembered. We respect all beliefs, but the galaxy wasn't buying it, because the humans didn't remember her clearly, but everyone else did. A Vritak scientist summarized the horror in one conference. "This girl, she appeared to thousands of our ancestors across 100 species. She altered the outcome of wars, shifted planetary histories, and vanished. She is remembered by all except the very species that supposedly birthed her. So I ask you, how do you forget your own God?" Human society began fracturing at the edges. Some started cults, some formed think tanks, some just stared at photos of empty rooms hoping to see her again. But the worst part, she wasn't done. In a deep space survey ship near the edge of the galaxy, a sensor drone picked up an impossible energy signature. Organic, humanoid, human. Adjacent, they investigated, they found a structure, not metal, not stone, something older. Inside it, footprints. One set, small, barefoot, leading to a single message carved into a stone humans had never seen. "You're not ready to remember me yet, but you will." The Galactic Council banned further discussion, labeled it a cognitive hazard, but too late, because humans everywhere began to dream, not of war, not of glory, of her standing alone, hands at her side, and a single question on her lips: "Will you be better than the last time?" In the days following the dream surge, a pattern emerged. Humans who heard the story and remembered her, truly remembered her, began to exhibit strange changes. Not powers, not mutations, understanding. Of things they'd never studied, of languages they'd never heard, of pain they'd never endured, but could describe in detail. And always, always the same sensation. She remembered me back. On Station Vantor 9, 27 different species attended an emergency convocation. A human delegate was invited. She never spoke. She just stood near the exit, watching, like she already knew what they were about to say. The Zenth High speaker stood first. "This being is not a myth. She is a constant, a sentient pattern echoing through civilizations. But we cannot locate her. We cannot trap her. We cannot even confirm if she was ever physical." Then the Brelzari matron added, "And yet she speaks only through humanity. She lives in them." That's when the human delegate finally raised her head. "You think we created her, didn't you?" someone asked. She shook her head. "We're not the source. We're the memory foam she pressed against. You all try to remember her, But humans were the only ones she lets forget. The room fell silent because deep down they all understood they needed to remember, but humans were protected from remembering completely. Why? A theory emerged. She wasn't a person. She wasn't even alive. She was an echo, a fracture in time, a multi-species trauma response encoded across neural fields of the galactic collective, a living memory that took form, and the form it chose was human, not because of genetics, but because no other species could carry the emotional weight of what she'd done, or what she'd had to watch. She didn't stop wars. She watched people kill each other until one side looked up and saw her standing there, silent, not judging, just remembering. Humanity hadn't invented her. They had contained her, buried her under stories, called her a myth because to do anything else would have broken them. But now that the galaxy was speaking of her again, she stirred. On a backwater human colony, a 6-year-old girl disappeared for 9 hours. She returned unharmed. But when questioned by her panicked parents, she only said one thing: "I was talking to the girl in the white dress." "What did she say?" The child smiled. "She told me I wouldn't have to choose." Not like she did. Human scientists tried to dismiss it. Mass hysteria, cultural panic. But across Earth, monuments began to appear. No one knew who built them, no credits exchanged, no contractors filed. Just statues of her, not named, not adorned, just a girl standing alone, waiting. And in the galactic deepnet a file appeared. No metadata, no origin, just one document, a transcript. Thousands of years old in dead languages, but readable in any system. The final line read: "She is not history. She is what happens when you make the same mistake too many times. She is the consequence." Callum Reed was transferred to Earth for observation. His mental scans showed one anomaly. He dreamed of her nightly, but his dreams didn't frighten him. He spoke with her, not as a god, not as a myth, but like a friend he hadn't seen in a long time. He was asked what she wanted. Callum never hesitated, nothing. She never asks for anything. She just watches and remembers. He looked out the window, stars beyond stars, and if enough of us forget again, she'll have to come back. Alone, like always.